What are harmonics and how do we play them on the violin? Hello fellow instrumentalists and welcome back to the channel. I'm Jacques Gadway and this is Gadway Violin. In today's video we're covering exactly what harmonics are and tips on how to play them purely and beautifully. So first off, let's explain exactly what a harmonic is on the violin. Harmonics are essentially overtones that naturally occur in a vibration of a string, and the way that we place our finger on the string allows us to highlight specific overtones. What we do when we play a harmonic is we place our finger in a very specific place that allows us to highlight a naturally occurring overtone in that string. Whenever we play the violin, every single note has an overtone series. This is because whenever a string vibrates, it doesn't just go left to right. It actually is divided in many different waves. And every single one of these sub-vibrations can be heard in the overtone series. What we do with our left hand when we create harmonics is we place our finger in a specific way that allows us to highlight one of these overtones. The most common overtones and the ones that we use with our natural harmonics are the ones that I would call the most simple divisions or simple fractions of our vibration. So if we take our string and we divide it in half, that's our most common harmonic, 1/2. We can actually visualize this on the violin by seeing the distance between the bridge and the nut, and if we take what we believe to be halfway between those points and cut the string in half, that note should produce a harmonic. In specific, it should produce exactly 1 octave above the fundamental pitch. In the case of natural harmonics, the fundamental pitch will always be the open string. In the case of false harmonics, which is a little bit more of an advanced concept, they're called false harmonics because we actually change where the fundamental pitch is by including additional fingers and stopping the string fully. But that concept is beyond the scope of this video. In the case of natural harmonics, as we're discussing in this video, always the fundamental pitch will be the bass open string. So the bass open string in this case will be our lowest string, G, and if we place our finger exactly halfway between the nut and the bridge, it should create the octave above and create our harmonic. Now when we play harmonics, we don't place our finger in the same way that we do when we play a regular note. We'll refer to regular notes as stopped notes. And that's because what we do with regular notes is we place our finger all the way down so that it pushes the string into the fingerboard. This stops the string from vibrating on the other side of the finger. And as a result, we get a new pitch that we hear exclusively. In the case of harmonics, we don't do this. We don't place the finger all the way down into the fingerboard, but rather we touch very lightly in a precise place. And in doing so, the string actually vibrates beautifully on both sides of the finger. This creates that beautiful, pure sound that we've come to all love with harmonics. Listen to the difference between these two notes. They will be the same pitch, but one will be a harmonic and one will be a fully stopped note. When we play a harmonic instead of a stopped note, we get this really pure sound. It's almost like we're playing an open string. Now we can create a harmonic in every perfect division of the string. So we can do it at the halfway point, we can do it if we divide the string into thirds, into quarters, and into fifths. Beyond that is probably beyond what we would normally see in music. The easiest place to play these harmonics is going to be in as low of a position as you can play. And for the remainder of these harmonics, we can play them all in first position. Let's divide the string into thirds, for example. If we take this string length and we divide it exactly into 3 sections, we can take that lower section and actually find that it's where our 4th finger naturally wants to go. And when we play it, it should play about 1/5 above our fundamental pitch. Well, not exactly 1/5, an octave plus 1/5, so it would be 1/12 above our fundamental pitch. Now, one of the interesting things is when we take these harmonics, we can produce the same harmonic on multiple parts of the instrument. If we remember that first harmonic that we looked at, where we divided the string into half, and we get that octave above, that is the singular place where we can create that harmonic on the instrument. But for the rest of these harmonics, there are going to be multiple places where you can create that same harmonic. That's because we're dividing the string into more than 2 sections. In the case of this harmonic, we're dividing the string into thirds, right? So in theory, if we place our finger exactly another third away from itself, we should get the same harmonic. So we can produce that harmonic here, and we can produce the same harmonic here. The next harmonic is when we divide the string into quarters. This one is going to be where our third finger naturally wants to go in first position. And because this divides the string into quarters, we can see that this harmonic can be found a couple of times. The interesting thing about this harmonic is that in theory, right, we were thinking we have the first quarter, which is where that placement was, and then the next quarter should give us the same harmonic. However, it doesn't, because if we recall, 2 quarters adds up to a half, and halfway through that string gives us that first harmonic we looked at, which is the single octave harmonic. This quarter harmonic gives us the 2 octave harmonic. So it can be found right there on that first quarter, and it can also be found on the last quarter. The last practical harmonic is going to be when we divide the string into fifths. This is when we place our second finger where it would normally want to go in a high position. And this creates about a third above our fundamental pitch. Well, a third and a couple octaves. But just like we saw before, every time we divide the string into a fifth, we should be able to find and recreate this same harmonic. So we see here that's the first fifth. If we find another fifth of the same length, we should be able to find it as well. And again, if we do another fifth, we should be able to find it as well. And again, if we do another fifth, we should be able to find it as well. Yeah, maybe that one's a little harder. But you get the point. So now we understand what harmonics are and where to find the most common ones on the violin. Let's talk about how to play them. Here are some tips on how to make your harmonics sound pure and beautiful. The first tip to playing natural harmonics is to make sure that your contact point of your finger that you're choosing to play the harmonic with is not the same contact point as when you're playing a stopped note. Remember that harmonics require us to barely touch the string. When you play a stopped note, you place your finger such that it presses the string all the way down into the fingerboard. When we play a harmonic, on the other hand, it's important that we barely touch the string as to try to create as little pressure on the string as possible. So while with a stopped note, we might be playing on the very, very edge of our finger to create a very accurate depression, with harmonics, we want to do the opposite. When we play a harmonic with the finger, we want to place our finger so that a fatty part of the finger is barely touching the string. In fact, when I place my fingers on the string for stopped notes, I like to think of them as landing on the thumb side of the finger. So if we look at our fingers here, they're making contact as much as possible on the thumb side during these placements. However, when I play harmonics, I like to think of placing my fingers more in the center of the fingertips. Tip number 2 for playing harmonics. When we play normally, our fingers should remain very curved with good hand frame throughout. However, when I play harmonics, I often actually find that my fingers straighten slightly. This helps me get to the kind of center of the fingertip that I'm looking for that contact point. You'll probably find that for your second and third finger, they'll retain much of their curvature, but for the pinky, it might feel the most comfortable to almost completely straighten for these harmonics. Tip number 3 for playing harmonics. Remember that there's a different contact point for the tip of your finger. That also means that the placement of your finger is generally going to feel sharp. What I mean by that is where you might place the finger and it be in tune for a fully stopped note, you can't keep your finger there for a harmonic. Because when you think about it, when you place your finger onto the string for a stopped note, it actually smooshes up against the fingerboard. And in doing so, the point that actually ends up being the furthest along the string is further than if there wasn't any pressure on the finger. This means that by its nature, if you simply lifted your finger out of the string and allowed it to regain its shape without being squished against the fingerboard, it would actually result in the part of the finger that's touching the string being lower relative to the part that was previously stopping the string. So it's important when playing harmonics to actually compensate for this. This means when you're playing a harmonic, you actually have to feel like the finger is a little bit more sharp than you're used to. If you look closely, you'll see how far it appears that my finger moves this way. It might not seem that far, especially if you're relatively new to the violin, but if you're seasoned in violin, you would know that that little difference makes a ton of difference in terms of your intonation. It's actually quite shocking how much you have to move the finger at first when you're first learning harmonics. Tip number 4, and the final tip, is when you're sliding up to a harmonic, which is a very common thing to find in violin repertoire. It's very important to actually approach the note with a solid finger. Something I see a lot with students is when they approach a harmonic, they approach it with a harmonic finger, meaning their finger is already flattened and tapping the string lightly. But actually, when you're approaching a harmonic, it's much easier if you keep a solid finger and you don't actually create the harmonic style finger until you're very, very close to the harmonic. As opposed to... This is because, if you notice, if you travel up to a harmonic with a harmonic style finger, you actually don't benefit from any of the information that your fingers normally give you when you're shifting. Normally, when you're shifting, in this case, we could think of it as going from first position to fourth position, your finger is guiding you with information all throughout the way. First of all, it's feeling the distance very clearly. We're of course not scraping the string, but we are touching it. And also, your ears are getting information based off of that movement. They're actually hearing all of the pitches very subtly in between the two notes. It's telling me we're getting close. When you play a harmonic, on the other hand, the information that you get in between harmonics is actually not useful at all. That's because the only notes or pitches that you really hear in between one harmonic and the next are any other harmonics that exist between them. And as you can tell, harmonics don't behave the same way that solid notes do. We might have a higher pitched harmonic below a lower pitched harmonic on the fingerboard. For example, when we play the harmonic halfway up the fingerboard, we get an octave above our fundamental pitch. But if we bring that arm lower, we play now third finger, we get an even higher note. This note is actually 2 octaves above the fundamental pitch. And then we get an even higher note if we go the note below that. So the information that you're getting from your fingers traveling in a harmonic style doesn't really translate to what we're used to on the violin. When shifting, we're used to benefiting from the information from our finger and our ear. So traveling up to a harmonic becomes a lot easier if you actually give yourself that information by simply traveling with what I would call a solid finger. This means placing the finger in a way that's not a harmonic until the very end. Of course, if you need to completely hide the shift, then that's another story. But in general, when we're approaching harmonics in this kind of style, we often have these glissandos. And of course, like everything, there are ways to taper it back without removing it completely. Either way, those are my tips on how to play harmonics and my explanation as to what harmonics even are. If you like this kind of content, please let me know by liking this video and leave a comment below if there's something tricky about harmonics that I didn't cover in this video. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a future upload, and happy practicing.